I'm late. I'm late for a very important date, and it's Sunday, and I'm looking a little different today. It's an easy day, and so I hope that Anyway, my name is Stacy Renee. I'm a mindset coach. This is the Grinch. This is the Grinch fan club, and I'm a life on life's terms coach because life is life in these days. And we go with the ups and the downs, or we grow with the ups and the downs. But just like we quit taking that personal. Just like our breath goes up and down, no one says, "Oh, my breath's going up and down. What's wrong with that?" Our heartbeat going up and down, no one says anything. Hello, super perfect self. It's good to see you this morning. Thank you for being here. So the talk this morning is that Kim? The talk this morning, or Pam, the talk this morning is about the obstacle isn't outside of you. It's the stories you believe. So we're wrapping up this week. I knew that was you, darling. It's good to see you. Grinch, say good morning to Kim. Quit checking around. See, there's the Grinch. We got the Grinch t-shirt on here. So the Grinch fan club. So, the obstacle isn't outside of you. It's the story you believe. And so we've talked this week about the obstacles. We talked about children learn what they live. And this is where children create those stories. But the thing is that as adults, see, Kimmy says, good morning. As adults, we carry these stories with us. And so this is what we're always trying to find evidence from. I'm perfect being from that one stream. So, yeah. Oh, well, good. Good. All right. So thank you for joining me here on this Sunday morning. And we're going to examine some things about these obstacles. And I'm going to tell you a story this morning. And it's going to involve, I've got 3 different types of stories to talk about this morning. So I'm going to get started here pretty soon. I see people are coming on. I apologize. I was a little late this morning. So I'm going to give people a few more minutes to get on here. I had a client already this morning. Sometimes I'm very flexible. When I say I meet people where they're at, I do. Birds are live. King David Jewish. Hello, Joseph. It's good to see you this morning, Joseph Leon. So we're going to talk about childhood conditioning to faith. We talked about faith earlier this week. How to have faith when we're in hard times. Very flexible. I know, girl. I know, because I'm meeting people where they're at. That's what we do as a mindset coach, is you meet people where they're at. So talking about, we talked about the childhood condition and children learning what they live. We talked about how to have faith in these hard times. And we talk about, is it obstacles or an opportunity? Because we have 2 ways to see the same thing. So we're going to be, winding that up this week. If y'all have any ideas for next week, that hurt. He bit me. If y'all have any ideas for next week, then, please feel free to put them in the comments or email me. And I don't have my email in there right now because I was running late. So there's some things that I've got to come back in and adjust. Everything's fixable, y'all. So sometimes when we're in those pits of despair, it's to remember that everything's fixable. I loved getting that advice. Everything is fixable, Stacy. Thank you very much, Kim. You are on it. So I've got my notes here so I can look at your comments, and also we can get to the story. But I like to do a recap in case you weren't here earlier this week. So this week we talked about, 3 different perspectives. Monday, we talked about how children learn what they live. I grew up in a house. Good morning, 5 Elements Infinity. It's good to see you. Good day to you. So, some of us grew up in these homes where we had these plaques on the walls, like children learn what they live. And even in that plaque, it had the positive and the negative attributes. And so when we learn life on life's terms has those positive and negative attributes. But most of the time when things are positive, we feel like a winner. And when things are negative, we feel like a failure or loser. So understanding that we all get a turn. Sometimes we may have jealousy that we can turn to admiration. We might have grown up with jealousy and not have learned admiration. So this is why I get on here, is I set my intention every morning to be able to help somebody, to consider things a different way, because I know for me, to change my perspectives, change my life. Yeah, he's a Quaker parrot, Stevie England. He's a Quaker parrot. They are mock parakeet is what they call them. So good morning, Ramon. How are you doing this fine day? It's good to see you. And I'm glad you got the things you needed yesterday. So we also talked about, we explored how many beliefs, behaviors, fears, coping skills, and survival patterns that we carry into adulthood that were learned long before we had the ability to question them. This is what we were talking about in Children Learn What They Live. You're not really jealous of Super Perfect Self says, I'm not really jealous of anyone. I'm living my own life. Don't really care if someone is doing better than me. So yeah, well, that's emotional maturity right there, isn't it? I wasn't always emotionally mature. I specialize in addiction recovery, codependency, and grief. And just a week away, I'm going to have 29 years clean and sober. So, yeah, I know y'all been hearing about it, but it is a big deal. And I used to, it's anonymous, is usually, but the thing is that I've overcome a lot in my life, sober, clean and sober, not using those outside coping mechanisms. And this is when I'm working with people that I help people learn to be able to go within themselves, that everything's connected, mind, body, and soul. And when we sabotage with those outside, trying to gather a false esteem and think that that self-esteem, rationalizing and justifying that, we also get to look at codependency in this learned behavior and children learning what they live. Some children did learn codependency. Codependency isn't always that you depend on somebody else, because while you may not depend on somebody else physically, you may depend on validation emotionally, and you may have never gotten that in your life. So this is something that we long for. And what we come to realize as children is that just because we grow up doesn't mean that longing stops. I got my water here. And so then there's grief, because life on life's terms is we're all going to experience grief. There's 300 different types of grief. 300. It's not always when a family member or a friend passes away. Grief can be grieving the childhood that you wish you'd had. You might be hitting repeat on that, and we just need to grow through it. And I'm not saying that you're ever going to heal, but what you'll learn is you can turn those survival skills into tangible tools. Birds, religion, and science. There you go. I don't talk about religion, though, here. I do talk about spirituality. Good morning, beautiful mama. Grinch, tell Nanny good morning. All right. Children are constantly learning. That's the thing. And so that's how we start learning how to perceive the world around us. They learn from what they experience. Well, thank you very much, Epic MSDOS. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. That's what I set my intention for in the morning, to be able to, spread some positive vibes and maybe help somebody who's trapped in their own mind, because we can get there, and especially, now. So children learn also from what they observe. What did a child see growing up? It's going to be hard for them to distinguish from a different reality from what they see growing up. So we have to learn. Good morning, Robbie. It's good to see you this morning. We've missed you here. So I'm glad that you're here. So you're going to get the recap of the whole week. I think you were here one of the days. I can't remember which one, though. They learn from what they observe. Like I said, what they see around them, how they feel with what they see around them. Our objective senses, what we see, smell, touch, taste, and hear, or what we receive our perceptions from. Have I ever experienced ego death? I have, to a degree, but I think that it's not a one and done ego death. Is that as long as we're human beings and human doings, And so we're always going to have dreams, goals, and visions. And so we have to learn a new realization of ourselves when we decide we have another dream or another goal or another vision, is that self-realization. And there's many ego deaths with self-realization, is that when we have to recalibrate, our ego could take a hit if we think that we're going to get it this way, but yet we have to learn that, is it, what is meant for me, what's not meant for me? Is it from the ego? Because I've been attached to things from my ego that maybe weren't necessarily meant for me. So I think that as long as I'm breathing, that I'm going to have some ego deaths. I'm probably going to have more, I did a lot of religious nutcases on here, making things worse for people. It's good to hear someone make sense. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Yeah, because I don't tell people who or what they need to believe. I have, faith, but I don't tell people who or what they need to believe. Super perfect self. I overthink on most things. Sometimes sometimes we do, and it's not feeling free, right? When I overthink, I don't feel free, Camilla. That's nobody's business if I took or didn't take the COVID shot. We don't talk about religion. We don't talk about politics. That's something that would consider in a political sphere around here. And we don't talk about my age on here. Okay. So these are things we don't talk about. And this is open, this community is open. So there's nothing like a division thing. I'm not saying anything people could be divided over unless they want to be divided over. This ego death is just a moment of perspective. The ego is a normal health. Exactly, Epic. Exactly. It is. And, I have a program, and I'm not, just trying to push it, but if anybody's interested, I do have a self-trust reset program where we embrace the ego and the soul, because the ego is at the solar plexus in our bodies. If we think about it, if you are into the chakras or anything like that, but the ego is at the center of the central nervous system. That's your flight, fight, and freeze. And so to deny that there's an ego there, but to align with the soul, because we don't need to be too vulnerable, and we don't want to be too, self-obsessed with the ego about what's this in it for me? What's going to protect me, to where we're in overdrive. So it is about merging it together, because there's harmony in between the ego and the soul. There's harmony to where we know, and that's that intuitiveness. Balance is ideal. Exactly. Because a lot of people, we talked about earlier this week about how some people feel like expectations are intuition. When you grew up in a childhood and you learn how to anticipate and strategize, we may think that's an intuition, but no, that's expectations. We talked about that when we said things. If our internal dialogue is when it rains, it pours. We get an expectation because one thing happened, that more things are going to happen. And I talked about how that's just a salt commercial from the early 1900s for a declogging agent. It doesn't mean that when it rains, it pours. So that is an expectation. We talked about how when the other shoe falls, that's just a quote from the early 1900s. First, I guess, to start building apartment buildings up. And so when someone got home from work, they took one shoe off, and then people waited for the other shoe to fall. Now, in reality, if you're the person taking the shoes off, it's a good day. You're finally there. It's your favorite part of the day, probably. That would be my favorite part of the day. And if you're the person downstairs hearing the shoes fall on your roof, well, if that's the worst thing that happens all day is hearing two shoes fall on the roof, then you're doing good. Doing good. It is tricky to maintain balance. That's why, I always say everything gets a turn, because some people may consider balance as when everything's going their way, that they're balanced. But it has to get off balance for us to be able to appreciate balance when it's there. Thank Five Elements Infinity. You have a good day too. Yes, that was Morton Salt, Mom. When it rains, it pours. And there's also the other one. Expecting the worst but hoping for the best, and that actually came at first from somebody in 1833. I put his name I think that was in the Friday night. So I'm sure I do. I like a lot of philosophy. So thank you, Joseph. I study a lot of things. I know a little about a lot of things. So. Children learn from the environment around them also. So if a child grows up around criticism, fear, addiction, chaos, codependency, emotional neglect, or shame, those experiences become a part of how they interpret themselves and the world around them. That, the basic feeling underneath all of that would be fear. See, this is why we push feelings down like a beach ball sometimes. And some children even grew up with that saying, if you cry, I'm going to give you something to cry about, or dry it up, And it's not that the parents were trying to be mean. It was that we didn't have Google. We didn't have YouTube. We didn't have a lot of the avenues that we have today. So parents did what their parents did, what their parents did, and their parents did, or went the opposite, because that's human. Epic. My parents had a pretty messed up dynamic. Nothing too traumatic, but that made it harder to realize it was off. Exactly, because we learn to hide things, right? We learn to hide things. And when we're trying to hide it from other people, we can't get exposed to the healing. That's the thing. You've been bullied before? bullying's such a bad thing. I wish that there wasn't bullying, but the real deal is, and I hate this, I hate it. It doesn't mean that I'm siding with the bully. When you talk about bullies and you talk about narcissism, these people were hurt too. And it's not to say to coddle them. I'm not saying to coddle them, but they're hurt. So if we can't help somebody, we don't need to hurt them further. It doesn't have to be a battle and a war with these people. What it has to be is that this isn't for me. This isn't for me, because not everything in our life is for us. It's the wisdom to know the difference. My client, just before I got on here, I said, do you know the serenity prayer? Now, like I say, this isn't a religious, but a spiritual, you could say spiritual is, there's a wisdom to know the difference, the courage to change the things you can, and the what I'm yelling, instead of drinking beer, I tried an effective alternative, which is drinking okay. Well, all right then. They did do the best they could. It is cool. So we're going to get to that too, because most of our parents did do the best they could. This is the thing, is we can't heal. What I've had to learn is we can't heal our children from our own wounds. And I try to do it too. And that's most of the time what our parents try to do. Is if you grew up with a parent who was really uncool, then you might have tried to be the cool parent. If your parent was really strict, then that may have been the wound that you didn't heal. So you decided, I'm going to be the cool parent, and then your kids may run over you, So it's just, that's not going to mean that we're going to have that perfect life. And then we may be sorely disappointed when we get older and our kids don't appreciate what we did from our pains. I'm just saying. That's the way it turns out sometimes. A lot of us will get a turn to experience that. So it's about being able to be humble. That was another thing that I talked about with the client before this getting on here, is having that self-realization. Because a lot of times when you're working with people, when we talk about the narcissistic or the bullying, because typically narcissism is bullying. That's the only reason I'm bringing that up, is that that term is thrown around pretty loosely. And the reality is that all of us can have the capacity to have some narcissistic traits at some point in time. In my codependency, I had narcissistic traits because I thought that everything was about me, that I had to fix everything, that I had to do everything, that everything was about me. And then I might think, and give other people my power at the same time. So this is a dynamic that's not mutual or equal. It's can be one-sided at this time, then one-sided at this time. And really what we want is mutual and equal, but we have to grow there, because maybe it wasn't modeled or anything like that in our childhoods, only because our parents didn't know better. And for us, as we got to be parents, because we didn't know better, because we didn't know better. So it's not about blaming our parents. We can't blame other people and empower ourselves. So most of us were not raised by perfect people, and most parents were doing the best they could with the tools that they had available. They really were. So many of them were carrying wounds that were never healed themselves, just like me, just like, my mom, just like my dad, just like their parents, is that we all try to do better. We just do. But if we don't heal our own wounds, we can't have expectations that our children are going to be thrilled with us for subjecting them to our pain, because they didn't have that pain. That wasn't their pain. And this is what I try to get us back to, is not about becoming somebody else, but to being yourself, who you were authentically born to be. But through what we see as children, through what we experience as adults, this creates our stories. That's going to lead us into story time this morning. So as adults, we eventually begin recognizing that some of the things that helped us survive childhood are no longer able to help us thrive in adulthood. They become self-sabotaging behaviors because they disconnect us. Because the ego, like everything else, has a negative and a positive to it. And most people just really think of the negative when they think of the ego. The ego gives you your drive. Your ego gives you your willpower. Your ego gives you your wanting to be alive, your desire to live. But too much is strategizing and anticipating and trying to just survive this life. And life is meant for you to live and navigate through. So when you can connect it in harmony with your soul and not be too vulnerable and not be walked on like a doormat and these kind of things, when you're not just trying to live that fluffy life thinking that everything is going to be all right just because you're trying to be a nice person, then you can come together in harmony and knowing that sometimes I have to have boundaries, like my mom said a while ago. Sometimes I have to have boundaries. So that's where healing begins. Thank you. Thank you, Aim yelling about Grinchy. That's Grinchy. Must. Okay. Trey Jones. Hey, good morning. It's good to see you today. Kim's on it. She's got this. She's got the deletes of the comments, y'all. So, I know. Yeah. The thing is that bullies hurt people, and that's what bullies are, is hurt people. And don't subject yourself to bullies. But, I would, you know, yin and yang. Yes, exactly. Yin yang. Everything's bad until it's not, and it's good until it's not. And that's life on life's terms. It was not meant to be easy, but it was at the same time. There's times we're going to experience the easy stuff, but the point is to experience the easy stuff. When people are hoping for the best but expecting the worst, they're not really fully living life, because you're sending two mixed messages to the universe. Because even if people don't believe in the source, there is this electromagnetic field that even has positive and negative. You're north, you're south. All of this is a realization. And self-esteem, self-realization comes from that word self. And so a lot of times when we were trained through watching things through our childhood, we may not have learned to consider ourselves. I work with people all the time, and I have to get them to ask people for help, because a lot of people don't feel comfortable asking for people for help. They feel like they have to be self-sufficient to prove their value, to prove that they're enough. So a lot of times I tell people, put "I am good enough" up on your mirror, because I know I had to do that. For me, it had to imprint, because I was always trying to prove that I was, but trying to prove that I was didn't make me have the feeling of it. And this is where you're sending mixed messages to yourself, cells, and soul in the universe. Yes, my hair is very natural. Yeah. Thank you, Aim yelling. Slow steady. Good evening. You always feel nervous around your workplace while everyone else feels pretty chill with the environment. I can give you some tips. We talk about that slow static is the central nervous system is maybe that is because you're anticipating and strategizing what you need to do to fit in, or to feel a part of, or to promote yourself, and you don't know how, because it's a lot of us haven't learned how to promote ourselves. I had to get people at my job to teach me how to do my resume, because I didn't give myself enough credit. And so maybe you're just not giving yourself enough credit. Slow static. Aim yelling. Exactly. Becoming an adult isn't the problem. Forgetting your past child self is. Yeah, but the thing is we can't just forget about it. It's going to keep popping up like that beach ball in the water. So it's meant to be healed. And we have to feel safe enough, because this is the thing, is that a lot of times the children didn't feel safe for whatever reason. Even if they grew up in a safe environment where the adults didn't even talk or communicate in the house, it still felt like a half life, right? Because we're not living with all the colors, taste, and textures. We didn't all learn how to communicate well. And social media maybe isn't helping that so much now, and maybe it is. So I hope that, I want to thank you all for being here this morning, because I hope what I say today is going to help you, because we have to learn to communicate. Self begins with self, learning how to communicate with ourselves. And if we're carrying this negative dialogue on in the background, we're not going to receive what we want from out there, because we're not going to believe it. We have to believe it to receive it, right? So, and it starts with ourself. Hey, great people. You made it, Cheese Jaded Wasted. Good day to you. Thank you. Thank you. I hope you have a lovely day too. I hope you're able to stay. Sandra, no one knows. Joseph, I connect with my inner child saying, that's a good way to connect, because it's about our sounds. We want to be heard. Everybody wants to be heard. And that's why there's so many people arguing in this division right now, is not only do people want to be heard, but they want to be right, which leads us into self-righteousness, right? Is that righteous? Because we're afraid to be wrong. So why are we afraid to be wrong? Maybe it was part of that tape growing up and everything, that fear of being wrong. So we talked about that this week too. So where healing begins, because we can't just forget about anything. We can't just forget. We've tried that. That's intellectualizing. Is I'm just going to forget about it. I'm just going to do the opposite. The thing is that we have to heal those feelings because the feelings were imprinted, embedded, and ingrained within us. When, your central nervous system, like was asked earlier, why do I feel less than other people, inadequate? And maybe that's what it sounded like. And I'm also, reflecting or projecting that because I know that I have felt that way too, inadequate, and, that I didn't belong. And so it was a learned behavior for me. And I'm not saying my parents modeled it, but some of the language that I learned didn't help with it. You know, that comparison, it's not only the thief of joy, it's the thief of self esteem. And again, we're going back to the self. And we could even be, I've shared before on here that, I got called selfish and self centered when I was 14. And the reality is that I could take that and be offended by it. And the same goes with bullies and everything else when they're, verbally abusing you. Is I could be offended by it, but it came from my dad. So I thought, oh, I'm selfish and self-centered. So I started giving all this stuff away, and the thing was that giving it away only would feel good for instant gratification. That's self-sabotage, right? Is when I'm doing that because I don't have an intention. I don't have a purpose. I haven't realized what that is. I'm trying to prove something. I'm trying to prove I'm not selfish and self centered by giving things away, but I'm not in the intention to be doing it because I can. And that's when it feels good, is when I'm doing it because I can, because that other will only feel good for a few moments, because then my low self esteem is going to come back from the fear of being selfish and self centered. But if you have a 14-year-old, they're most likely selfish and self-centered. And I was selfish and self-centered in my drugs too. Yeah. So let's see. Eric, talking to my dad now is like talking to a kid. That's how I know I've made progress. There you go. There you grow, right, Eric? Epic. Aim yelling. Proving something to other people is not the first thing that you should focus on. You should focus on what it is to prove to yourself. Right? But 14-year-olds don't know that. 14-year-olds don't know. So that's how we develop. If we didn't, at 14, I started using my coping also was using drugs and alcohol. And so I started using the drugs and alcohol more so at 14. My cousin gave me a little pink joint when I was 11 years old and told me that she said, if you don't smoke this, then I'm going to tell everybody that you did smoke it. So me being a stupid kid, I smoked a joint at 11 and I had beer on occasion before that. Can I ask for your opinion on something that involves chasing dreams? You can ask. I don't know if I'll be able to answer it, but you certainly can ask. G's jaded waist is. Joseph, there is no wrong. There's only perfection deeply. We are all perfectly imperfect, right, Joseph? And I had a client the other day, I told her her mantra was going to be, I'm unspecially special. Because I know for me, the core wound of my childlike self, not my childlike, but my childhood wound is that not feeling special enough, which may seem ridiculous to a lot of people because I was born on my grandma's birthday. And so I was, and my brothers, they didn't get treated as special as I did. I was the firstborn girl in our family, you know, but it's that ego. That ego has the desire to feel special. And so if my ego has not matured, then I'm going to still be carrying around as an adult that desire to feel special and never feel special if I don't acknowledge it within myself. See, and that's that healing the inner child wound, is knowing that I am special. And then it's about doing that exercise. I had to do this exercise when how I learned and discovered that my inner child wants to act up when I don't feel special, because I did an exercise when somebody didn't invite me to do something and I was mad, throwing the phone mad. I was mad. And so I'm like, why are you so mad, Stacy? And it's like, because I feel left out. And it's like, why do you feel left out, Stacy? It's because blah, blah, blah. I can't tell you what it was because it's been so many years ago. So I don't know the whole scale of my why exercise. But when it got down to it, it's like, because I don't feel special. That's why. That's why I want to act up. That's why I want to be mad and angry, And so now, if I don't feel special, I know, oh, you just don't feel special, but you are. See, I've learned how to adult myself, to have that inner dialogue with myself. Thank you, Aim Yelling. That's because I have cried many tears to get this grown. And And that's watering the soul, and a lot of people are afraid to cry. Like I said, people might have been told, if you cry, I'll give you something to cry about. What this did is it caused you not to realize your feelings or be able to process your feelings. And no one meant to do it on purpose. It was handed down from generation to generation. Where would they come up with the dialogue? So it's being mindful and creating our own dialogue, right? Thank you so much. Don't hit on the shrink. It's just gross. I didn't even see what they said, y'all. Thanks, Epic. Hello, Sandeep Banger. My nails are showing. Slow steady. You are very welcome. A is a drug. Ask for it regularly, I think. Sandeep Banger. Alcohol is a drug. Yeah, alcohol is a drug. Leo Lee, it's good to see you again. The self is merely a term that designates the whole personality. The self is on the one side and the ego, and on the other side, the unconscious. Yes, the unconscious and conscious. And a lot of times we're running off the unconscious part. And that's the part that, is running in survival mode, is unconscious. But once we start doing the healing process, it helps us to become more conscious, because as long as we're trying to defend what we or fear that people think we are, we don't get to actually be who we are. And who we are is in all consciousness. Your past does affect your future, Juice. Yes, it does. Oh, Kim, your daughter was born on your grandmother's birthday. See, that's a specialness. And I was born on my mama's birthday too. And so I was treated more special. My mama says I'm still special, y'all. If your mama don't think you're special, you're in trouble. My mama thinks I'm special. So yeah, thank you, mama. That is a reason people struggle, is because of their past, is that whether or not we realize it in our mind or conscious of it, as was said, is that sometimes it has affected the central nervous system. I know for me that it did, because like once I got clean from drugs and alcohol, I learned about my codependency. But even getting clean from the drugs and the alcohol and learning about my codependency, my central nervous system was still anticipating and strategizing. What did I need to do to be accepted? And I had to learn how to accept myself. And that came from me getting the Reiki done. Because I, as a person who can't use drugs, is that I don't really like, I won't use drugs. I'm not saying that if I had a health issue, I would use, whatever was prescribed if I had a health issue. But I can say being clean and sober and having this, my spiritual life, is that I don't need that. But I did get Reiki. And what Reiki does is we have these ganglia chains, and our brain is always sending messages, and our feelings are part of those messages. You have ganglia chains, which have your autonomic and cerebrospinal system. The autonomic system is like automatic. And that's why when you get triggered, you may want to react. And this is where that self trust comes in, is because sometimes we react and then we have to go back and then apologize. And so it's back and forth, and it's the same thing, different day. So if we want things to change, we have to be willing to change, and certainly being able to take that trauma away. Because every time my parents got in fights when I was a kid, what kids do is they're like, and I even huddled with my brothers, and things like this. So when this happens, we go, sometimes we'd be at my grandparents, at my mama's, Kim. We'd be at my mama's and we'd be playing, and we'd hear the voices get louder. And then all of a sudden you knew you're about to get yanked up, and you're like, here we go again, and all these different things. And so I had to get that moved away from my spinal cord, because your backbone, it contains a lot of information that you don't realize, that your backbone carries information. We know that if you injure your back, it affects your brain, and vice versa. So there's a lot to that. And getting to know your body. You can get to know your body now, or you can get to know it later. That's the thing. Geez, jaded, wasted. But other part of me is saying save money. Oh, I wanted to get into motorsports since I was a small kid, but I'm older and I have an opportunity to buy a car and attend some events nearby, but it's costly. And one part of me says go chase it, but the other part says save money. Yeah, see, it's like, what do you want? And to start off small, and it is, can I afford it mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally, and financially? I have to channel things through that as a mature Stacy. Can I afford it mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally, and financially? And if I can't in one of those areas, I really need to give it a lot of thought. And I know that sometimes we overthink things, like was said. And Epic says, try Zim Racing Juice. It's great fun. See, that's what I love about this community and people getting on here is that there's always somebody who's had some experience with something, and we can help and lift each other up. I've been experimenting with worthlessness. If we're worthless, then we're all equal. I used to feel worthless, and I say that I went from worthless to purpose because I did feel worthless. But my feeling of worthlessness has given me my purpose, is because that I tell people I went from sad ass to badass, because feeling sad got me to where, because the feeling of being sad itself is sometimes we don't change until the pain gets great enough. And that's when we change. You do have to let your emotions out. I do a practice called tapping, the emotional freedom technique, with my clients. So even though, because the thing is we experience emotions, and a lot of people, our mature self talks to our inner child, and the inner child is the emotionally immature self, the one that doesn't feel special. And so what we do is the adult self and the child self, the reactive self, the adult self says should. And, the first thing I learned in therapy was don't should on yourself. I should have done this. I should have done that. That's our second guessing and not trusting ourselves. And so I had to learn not to second guess and not to trust myself. It's not saying that I don't think about things, but to second guess myself and to have regret, that's going to eat me up, and obsessive. I'm yelling. Well, making other people's day by a simple day by saying a compliment is a small thing that puts a smile on other people's faces. So I will compliment. I think that's great, aim yelling. I think that's great. I agree. Because there's so much good out there in the world, and so many people afraid of what's not going good in the world. To be able to even notice and compliment somebody, that's huge. So thank you for sharing that, Juice. You have to let your emotions out, because we will explode and probably end up in jail. That's right. Or, I work with clients too that when they don't ask for help, what happens is that they keep it bottled in. They keep it bottled in, and then they explode about nobody ever helps me. And they perceive that to be a part of their self-esteem, that nobody cares about them. And that isn't what that means. It means that some people in this world will help you and some people won't. That's what that means. And as long as you keep doing the things, then people are going to keep letting you, because we are conditioned, and we condition other people that we will do it if they don't. And I've had to learn that. And sometimes people have gotten mad at me because I didn't do what they wanted me to do, because it was convenient for them for me to do that, to be that doormat, to be this. And you're going to get pushback. That's why you have to build a self-esteem, to know your worth and your value without what you can do for somebody else. That's what's important. So healing isn't blaming. Healing isn't staying stuck in the past. Healing is becoming aware. Healing is recognize what we learned and deciding whether it still serves us. Okay. Wednesday, we talked about lies. I had the book out here, The People of the Lie. Because a lot of these tapes from our childhood years were lies that were lived down, and lies and lies and lies. Rationalize has the lies in it. Justifying poor behaviors, or behaviors that we didn't know we just didn't know any other way. So the lies that others told us, the lies we absorbed, the lies we repeated to ourselves until they felt true, like what I talked about earlier about, the expectations. Those expectations make us think less of ourselves too, because when we, whether we prove ourselves right or we prove ourselves wrong, the feeling is still the same. It's still a sucky feeling, right? So the lies, some people were told they weren't enough, that there was something wrong with them. I've worked with people in the weight loss area that, have been put on diets 8 and 11 years old. And what that tells them is there's something wrong with you, And the crazy thing is a lot of people that are doing that are doing the same thing. or they're going from one extreme to the other because maybe they had childhood pain from being overweight, so they may be projecting it onto their children. They hadn't healed that pain. So this is what it was talking about. So some people were told they weren't enough. Some people were told they were too much, that when they asked for something, they felt like they were too much, that, every time they asked for something, somebody threw their arms up and got dramatic or something. And it was a big deal. So they learned not to ask for anything. Right? So some people learned that love had to be earned, that you had to earn love. This is why some people will say they don't deserve it. Darling, we are all deserving of love. It doesn't mean that you give your love to everyone else. First, love yourself. It's like the oxygen mask. You need to put your mask on before you give to somebody else, because somebody else may be over here saying, no, I've got it. And that's usually the ego person over here that's protecting themselves with their ego. So you have to honor yourself, because when we honor ourselves, we'll honor someone else, because we won't be given from an empty cup. We also won't be giving to an empty cup, that's not willing to be filled, that's not wanting to be filled. So some learned love had to be earned. Maybe somebody told you don't deserve. And I can't say if you can, or if you do or you don't, but I think most of us are more deserving than people say, right? So others learned that keeping peace was more important than speaking their truth. I know for myself, I had to work on, conflict and confrontation. Because when I grew up, conflict and confrontation looked like rage and cars peeling out the driveway and curse words flying. And that is not boundaries, y'all. That is not boundaries. We talk about loving boundaries on here. Loving boundaries means that we say, it hurt my feelings when this happened. I had to learn to say that. It hurt my feelings when this happened. I had to learn to say, I feel like this when this happens, and maybe I'm misunderstanding. Can you explain this to me? Rather than making up a story, right? I used to make up stories about low self-worth, and I talked about that earlier this week too, about how even when we do that, we're not honoring ourselves, because we are still telling ourselves, even when we're fighting against what we think somebody says about us. I had to sit with somebody this week and said, did they say that? Because that had to be said to me. Did they say that? Because I would think in my strategizing about this and that, about what another person was saying. And if they didn't say it, then I didn't know it. And I had to learn that. That's part of humility, is learning that I don't know. Because I can make enemies out of things that I didn't know, So over time, these experiences become beliefs. And beliefs become expectations. And eventually we stop questioning them. We just start running on it. We simply assume that they're true. And the challenge is that many of these beliefs are built on incomplete information, wounded experience, and limitations of other people. Leo, even a happy life cannot be without a measure of darkness, and the word happy would lose its meaning if it weren't that. Exactly, Leo, exactly. I'm going to go ahead and pin that. All right, so epic. Yes, brother, it's pretty great in setting a skill, motorsport. Okay, Ramon, mine thinks I'm special. Ed, I know, right, Ramon? You're special. I can't wait to see what you draw. Epic. I do it all the time. Okay. So that was... So you basically live online in virtual reality, and that's the skill set. I don't live online all the time, but I do have an intention of coming on here, of helping other people who are sitting in front of the computer feeling alone and feeling like they don't have anybody, and not knowing why they think the way that they think, and feeling like they're isolated, because we're all a part of something. And that's what I'm creating here, is unity and community, that we all can go from worthless to purpose. If I can go from worthless to purpose, you can grow from worthless to purpose. If I can go from sad ass to badass, you can grow from sad ass to badass. Because I'm special, but I'm not. So settling for something is a skill. Oh, you don't suck. No. All right, Robbie, you're going to bed? Okay. All right. Well, I'm glad that we got to see you today. I was wondering where you were, so I'm glad to know that you're doing well. Okay. All right. You get you some blessed and regenerated rest. Good night. Trey, it sucks being easy to trigger. It does suck being easy to trigger, and it's from your nervous system. That's why. Because the nervous system can be wound up tight. And when we're wound up tight, we aren't really even getting to enjoy the experience of life. I know that I was that way because I was always waiting for that other shoe to fall. I waited for the other shoe to fall. These were my expectations. And I had to learn how to get within my own realizations. My expectations were catastrophizing. And so when I was in therapy, she's like, Stacy, because I'd be like, well, what if this happens? What if that happens? What if this? And she'd say, Stacy, can't you imagine something good happening? And I'd be like, I don't have an imagination. And she was like, oh, yes, you do. And I didn't know. Sometimes, people have to say things I disagree with. And that was a skill in itself. That was emotional maturity, is learning how to listen to people who said things I disagree with rather than be offended because I was afraid they would think I was stupid. And so I would push them away if I thought that they thought that I was stupid. And see, I didn't know what they thought. And they may genuinely be trying to tell me something I need to hear. That they're not thinking that because I don't know what people are thinking. Not unless they tell me. So there's a whole generation of triggered. There sure is. You can't just grow thicker skin. That's not very nice to say that even, because you can't just grow thicker skin. It's a healing. It's healing. And we have to be gentle with ourselves. So when we do finish our breathing at the end of the story, we are going to be able to, let things go in a gentle way, because we all want to be gentle. I thought I balanced your chakras last time I was there, Mom. So parents say, I'll give you something to cry about without addressing the problem. Yeah, they do. But that's because for so long, a lot of our parents didn't have Google or YouTube. For me to break those cycles and patterns, I got this, somebody gifted me when I was a single mom, this CD set of Love and Logic. And that helped me a great deal, because what happens is when we got butt bustings, it didn't teach us the cause and effect or consequences. The only consequences we knew was that our parents was going to whoop our butt. But we didn't learn how to make choices based on that, really, because that's why we either learn to be fearful or to go to these extremes. And sometimes it was inconsistent, even those butt bustings, because sometimes we just got a butt busting because a parent had a bad day or something, or they misunderstood something. So the butt bustings in themselves, and frankly, we get to an age to where I'd rather take a butt busting when I was a teenager than getting grounded, and that being a cause and effect, right? So what I had to learn in Love and Logic was how to make rational decisions, and I use the example all the time of, growing up is our parents didn't get the tools of that, because a lot of us repeated it to where you're like driving the car and the kids are fighting in the back seat and you're like, stop it right now. And Love and Logic taught me to where I can break that pattern by pulling the car over. So that's what I did. I would listen to those CDs. And then when my kids were fighting in the back seat, I pulled the car over. And they're like still fighting for a few minutes. And I'm just sitting there. And then they got quiet. And they're like, Mom, what are we doing? And I'm like, I can't drive this car while y'all are fighting like that. And it's dangerous for me to be trying to swat y'all in the back seat while I'm trying to drive the car too. So we can move after y'all stop. But I'm not going to. Because the thing is nothing changes till it changes. And that's why we see these patterns that may not be working for us. And that's just it, is understanding that it's not about us because it doesn't change. It's just that we have to change the pattern for things to work better. And I'm not saying that we have any control over anybody else. That's the wisdom to know the difference, what we can control and what we can't. So, so your thoughts are recorded in your brain, in your RNA, not your brain. Well, the thing is that we have a brain here, obviously. There's like your heart brain and your digestive. You have a gut brain too. So the body is always working together along this ganglia chain, which is autonomic and cerebrospinal. So the autonomic is the automatic thoughts that you think from your perceptions, and this is what causes the triggers. And then the cerebrospinal will do with the reactions. So it will do and feel the way that your the brain is telling it to do. So when we can control that, is the only way I have found to control that is first off my problem, not everybody else's problem. That's where bullyism comes in, and these other things is that sometimes we want other people to make us feel safe. That's where we try to control things outside of ourselves so that we can feel safe. Safety is our thing to do, our job. It's my job for me to feel safe, and I have to make decisions and choices accordingly because the world is not going to. It's just not. Hi, Nick. So, Trey, that's the only way, honestly, who cares what people think, right? The problem was that children were being disobedient. Well, we're all disobedient. As adults, we're disobedient sometimes too. And I've got a video that's gotten a lot of sites from like 6 years ago, treating adults like children, because if we don't heal our childhood pain, is we or others are going to be treated like treated like children. A lot of times that's where we give our power away. Why would we give our power to another adult unless it was the inner child feeling like we were less than, right? And so we would give our power away to another adult. This is when when we're walking on eggshells. That I need to look up where that saying came from. But when we're doing these kind of things, that's when we're giving our power away, because when we can't feel like a whole person, because you were born whole, you were born worthy. All of those things you were born with. We didn't come out of the womb saying, I'm too fat, I'm not smart enough, I'm not pretty enough. That enough thing was something that either got programmed in childhood or in adulthood, from the TV, from religion, from any kind of number of things. We talked about that in The People of the Lie, where all these comes from. So healing requires us to challenge those beliefs, and it requires honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness, because we need to be open-minded. Could I be wrong? You can obsess over pet peeves, Trey. I used to be able to too. Hello, Dawn. It's good to see you this morning. There's several generations that get triggered very easily about anything and never got disciplined from their idiot, pathetic parents. I don't even like that word idiot, though. I really don't. And it is sad that some parents just didn't know better. And I could judge them too, but I choose not to, because the thing is that I think we would have all, Brene Brown says this, we would have all done better if we would have known better, you know. And even those parents, I've been watching a parent, and it's hard for me not to want to judge them on YouTube, and I've got to stop watching that. And it's hard for me not to want to judge them, but it's kind of is triggering. So it reminds me of things that I know, myself. And so, but to have that compassion, healing requires us to have compassion. See, we're able to humanize other human beings. It doesn't mean that we have to like their behavior. It doesn't mean we have to co-sign their behavior. It doesn't mean that we have to participate in their behavior. But do I need to judge anybody? Does my thoughts and opinions matter in the grand scheme of things? They don't. They don't. What matters is that I show up myself with compassion and empathy for those who can experience and feel that. And if they can't, then I still don't need to be mean to them and form an opinion or thought about them, because it doesn't matter. It don't matter what I think or feel, right? I'm not saying that in a bad way. I'm saying that in a freedom way, because when I don't feel like I need to judge somebody else, I get a lot of freedom. Parents should never assume why you're crying. No, it would be nice if they would have known to say, darling, what are you crying about? And then to empower you, because they either, the way that what they wanted, if they didn't have a parent that did that to them, was they wanted a parent to co-sign. See, a lot of the parents that get called enablers, and there are, but they co-sign. They will co-sign things from their own pain. That's all. Children cry. They have a voice, though. This is part of shutting down a child's voice, is that the crying comes from the voice, right? And if a child's voice is shut down for crying, if they're told they can't cry, and we can't just assume that all children are crying because of irrational things. We know that their first tears are either that they want food, they need a diaper changed, or they want affection. Sometimes they just want to be held, and that's their right. So, and it's proven that if a child is held, that they are more nurtured and they're not searching for that outside of themselves. All right, so I should totally deplete mind seed. Okay, I don't understand. I don't know why everything I say goes over your head, Rohit Shadori. Aw. Leo, I self-isolate because I grow up too fast. Every time I fight myself to go out, I end up in trouble because I have a very low tolerance for disrespect and people are disrespectful. Leo, I hope you can get some coaching one day because not everybody is disrespectful. And sometimes when we're afraid of people being disrespectful, which I would think that would be, some of what's happening too. Because if I think people are disrespectful, I'm going to be afraid of people being disrespectful, and that might keep me in the house. And I used to think that the world was a bad place too. I used to think people were bad, and I didn't even know I thought people were bad. But that was part of my isolation, part of my, building this wall around myself to protect myself, is that I thought that people were bad. I don't think people are bad anymore. I know that not everybody has my best interest at heart, and they don't have to, because we're all a catalyst for somebody's growth. And it's like, how do I want to show up as a catalyst? Because even these bullies are catalysts for somebody's growth, for them to start having their own self-esteem, because what they're trying to do is take your self-esteem. Don't let them take it, but we have to work on it. Why would I let them take my self-esteem? And do I need a lot of people, their first reaction is to bully back or to hide, but we can still walk with our heads up, but we weren't taught that. That's all. We just weren't taught to ignore a bully, and we're told to ignore them. But when our feelings weren't recognized about how it makes us feel when a bully, we don't get to learn how to process our feelings. So just learning to process our feelings. Once I knew that I thought that people were bad, then I could start looking for the good once I knew that. And so I have found that there's a lot of good people out there, a lot of good people that want to help me, a lot of good people that inspire me. Saving my damage. I live stream on like, I'm here on Monday nights and Friday nights at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. And then I'm on here on Wednesday mornings and Sunday mornings at 9 a.m. Central Standard Time. Thank you for asking. The videos, though, are shown in the other, you can still catch the videos if you want. That's what I love about YouTube, is if somebody misses me, then they can go back and watch the video, where when I'm on TikTok, that's not the case. And I don't, Facebook, I can do a subscription, and that's probably what I'm going to do after I finish my Unbound Self workshop that I'm finishing up. Then I'll probably do the subscription part of Facebook. Thank you for being here, though. I'm glad you're here, saving the damage. Self-conscious. Okay. We have always been loved and will be loved forever. But the important thing is, until we learn to love ourselves, we may not experience that love, Joseph, right? Is that we may be looking for love outside of ourselves until we learn to self-love. And a lot of us weren't taught self-love, because if our parents were wounded, they may not have learned self-love. So we can't give from an empty cup. Don. He kicked all the internet and TV connection up yesterday and threw my Lenovo at me and tempered. When I cried, he told me to stop sniveling about being dramatic when he saw me cry about it later. I hope someday you'll be able to leave, because I don't think he's going to change, Don. I do hope. And I hate that you had to experience that. It's not okay for an adult to throw these temper tantrums, to break our things, and to verbally abuse us and to torment us. I know I've experienced that too, and that was I had to leave because I couldn't love them and love myself, Good morning, Mr. Simon Vittert. It's good to see you. Leo Lee, I grew up with stopping was when I would rather bleed or pass out, and my mom would make me feel like nothing because she constantly told me I was worthless and I should leave. And no, that's so sad. When that's verbal abuse, and I hope that you know that, Leo Lee. That's not you. Your mom was verbally abusive if that's what she did. You know, John London. It's good to see you again. I missed you. Thank you. I'm so glad that you're here. I shared that on Friday that I won't be able to move to Valencia, Spain, but I'll be able to move to London or Italy. So I'm shooting for Italy now because guess what? Valencia or Spain won't let me bring my parrot in. And I've had this parrot for 10 years. So the parrot is going where I go. So I've got to go somewhere that they allow Quaker parrots. Hello, Shures. If no one has told you yet, you're wonderful, bright, beautiful, and hopefully the rest of your day goes. Thank you, Hello, Sure. I appreciate that. Shanakia7. Hello. How are you this morning? Joseph Leon. Then we don't need validation. No, we have to validate ourselves, and it's nice to have compliments, but people that don't validate themselves won't even receive compliments. You know, I've worked with people who think that when they get complimented, and they've worked hard to get compliments, and then when they get compliments, they're still not filled because then they think that they're just saying that, right? They're just saying that, or it's a backhanded compliment, or they're just doing this because they have to. And until we get aligned with ourselves and realize where we were taught obligation, or we were taught to prove it, and we weren't taught purposely those things. We might have interpreted it that way. But we have to break that interpretation to realize that we are whole, and that when we get a compliment, for the most part, most people are not going to compliment you unless you really, you know, they think something. They're going to be like, oh, like when people compliment me, I don't think, why are they complimenting me? But I used to. I used to wonder, you know, if it was a real compliment. I'm doing good, Shanakia7, Mr. Simon Beard, and then John London. Hopefully we'll rediscover the badass within. See, you've been here a while, growing from sad ass to badass, from worthless to purpose, because we all have it. I'm specially unspecial, unspecially special, because it all goes back and forth, right? Yes. Hello, Hero Mythil. Yes. Leo. I have so much trauma in life. I get paranoid and I'm always on edge, prepared for something to happen. Well, that's your central nervous system, because when we have had trauma, it's not just going to go away. That's our central nervous system prepares for it. So it's your mind, body, and soul. That's a lot of PTSD because your body keeps the score. And it's not just going to go away because you get an adult body. I know most of us feel like it's just going to go away because we got an adult body, but it doesn't. We have to learn how to process it. And if we didn't learn how to process our tears when we were a child, then we're not going to, understand. We may think that our tears make us weak as an adult when we were told that you have to be quiet when you have tears, because tears cleanse your soul. That's why my eyes are so clear, is because if I have to cry, I cry, you know? So I may have to go to the bathroom and excuse myself sometimes if it's not appropriate, to cry where I'm at, if it's in front of people. But sometimes if I just need to cry, I cry. So being honest and open-minded and willing requires us to examine whether what we learned is actually true. Like what your mom told you is not true when your mom verbally abused you. It requires us to examine what we learned, if that's actually true, and it requires faith. And you already have faith, or you wouldn't question it at all, or you wouldn't even be here and be able to talk about it, because there's a faith, and that's strength in that, so it's not necessarily religious faith, y'all. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about knowing that you've overcome things and having faith, if nothing else, in yourself. For me, I think that my source is part of my self, cells, and soul. So it's not necessarily, like I said, religious faith. But faith is in the healing process. Faith that you can heal, seeing where you've overcome other things in your life. Remember to keep track of that, because sometimes we're keeping track of the pain more so than the gain. So faith and growth. Faith that we're capable of becoming more than just our conditioning. Faith that our past doesn't dictate our future. Then we come to Friday. Friday, we talked about obstacles and opportunities. Which one is it? Because a lot of us just see obstacle after obstacle after obstacle and we feel defeated. But it might be an opportunity. And what brought that up Friday was the fact that I can't move to Spain now. And I've been talking about it for a year, and that I have to just re-navigate. It's not impossible. I am possible. But possible is synced with opportunities. Impossible is synced with obstacles. So it's about being able to choose our thoughts, not what was programmed into us, not those doubts and fears. When we breathe out later on, after we do the story, and we're getting closer, when we breathe out those doubts and fears. You know, because anytime we're leveling up, because life is a series of adventures, and sometimes we do get imposter syndrome because we're just going to a different level we've not been to before. And there is uncertainty. You know, and sometimes we think, who am I to go to that level? And there's a poem by Marianne Williamson who says, who am I not to be great? Who am I not? Because in that poem, it says something like, who am I to think I'm this? I'm great. Who am I to think that I'm great? And it's like, who are you not to think that you're great? Because there's something on the other side of everything. Sometimes we just need help getting to that other side. We don't know what the other side is. Like when I learned jealousy, I didn't know that. I didn't learn admiration. I had to learn admiration as an adult is the same feeling as jealousy, but it's the positive part of that. So I had to learn how to do the part that didn't make me feel sad, because being jealous made me feel sad. But admiring makes me inspired, right? So God always wins, yes. Okay, Joseph, there is no win or lose, only peace and stillness. Yes. It's just like our heart rate and our breath goes up and down. That's the way life on life's terms is. It's not always going to stay up here, and we don't need to fear going down, because down is an opportunity. Or some people may consider it an obstacle, and it may be an obstacle, but it can turn to an opportunity. I always say lessons to blessings. Nope, I didn't. I don't know what I didn't do, Mom. I can't even remember what I was saying when that would comment. I got to catch up with the comments. Harrow. Okay, I don't know if you're trying to be nice or not, Harrow. What is the stream about? The stream is about we're catching up on the week, because I come on here streaming all week. I come on Friday nights and Monday nights at 6 p.m. Central Standard. I'm on here Sunday mornings and Wednesday mornings at 9 a.m. Central Standard. So we've talked about all the topics we've talked about this week, which was now we're at obstacles or opportunities. We talked about children learn what they live, and we talked about having faith. We talked about having faith in hard times. And now we're almost to story time in which I actually have characters that maybe have played a role like we've played in this life. Thank you, peace always for usual. Leo Lee. I don't believe it's a pattern. My mom was treated like an angel as a child. She may resent being treated like an angel. I don't know, Leo Lee. I would have to, if you want one-on-one sessions with me, because I speak to so many people here, that I would have to be able to help you dig to see what the thing is. But that wasn't nice. That was bullying in itself. And so you might have kept experiencing bullying, because that's what happens sometimes, is this energy. People can tell what we develop is this energy in our body. That's your cerebrospinal, chain here, your cerebrospinal chain. And so your posture, when we're trying not to be seen, when we've been bullied, our posture does like this, right? So we may be always doing like this because we're trying not to be seen. It becomes your body language, your feelings. Your words are expressions of your thoughts, and your feelings are expressed in your body. So this is why we have to be in alignment. So if I want a job, but I'm not sure if I'm going to get it, I may show up for a job interview going, yeah, I would really like this job. I really would like this job. But if your feelings are measured with it, you'll be like, really? I would love this job. Yeah, I think I would be a good fit for this job. So which one are you going to hire? The one that's like, I would really like this job, or the one that's going to be like, yeah, I'm ready to show up for work Monday. So that's just the difference. This is how your body, whether you know or not, your body will be sending messages, and people that see you doing like this, they know. If they're a bully, see, they know who they can bully. If you're like this, do you think bullies might come up to you, but if they feel like it has no effect, this is why they say ignore them. But you can't always ignore them because sometimes people hate your light. Sometimes people will hate your light. You can be a light person, you can be a nice person, and bullies will hate your light. They will try to steal it. Meant he mucked it up, right? Darling, I hope you can put that energy on yourself and don't give him too much energy. Even though he's going to try to take up the whole space, you remember who you are. I used to pray out under the moon and the stars. I think that voice should be encouraged and they know what's best for themselves and others. Yes. Phoenix Caliber. I remember crying so much I couldn't breathe and being shouted at to shut. Aw, that's so sad, Phoenix Caliber. Have you done any healing work around that? And do you feel comfortable crying now? Because crying actually releases pressure. Sometimes I just cry because I have pressure. You know, some of the pressure is pressure I put on myself for my deadlines and goals. Sometimes it's pressure of what I need to get done, but it's pressure. And sometimes I feel defeated that I'm not getting it done the way that I want to. And it doesn't mean that that's a fact, but it means that I deserve to cry because sometimes I put more pressure on myself, like a lot of us do, right? And so I just need to cry sometimes. And that was amazing. I still got a note from my daughter that she wrote to my son because when I was a single mom and I had pressures about how am I going to support these two kids? How am I going to do this? You know, how am I going to do this? And I was crying in my bedroom, and it wasn't the kids' problem. You know, make sure you don't. And my daughter comes in and says, Mommy, why are you crying? I'm like, baby, sometimes you just need to cry. Sometimes we just need to cry. She wrote her brother a note. She's probably about 7 years old. She wrote her brother a note. I just heard the most amazing thing. You need to cry sometimes. You know, we just need to cry sometimes. It's a release. So I hope that you're okay with your crying now, Phoenix Caliber. It's disintegrating, but it's okay, Joseph. They should be listened to carefully too. Yes, children have a lot of insight. Children, I believe, are more connected if you do believe in source. I believe children are more connected because they haven't had as many life experiences, so their innocence, you know, takes a long time to know your purpose. It does. But when we realize the obstacles that we've overcome have created our purpose, most likely. Funky Labs. I don't teach school. I don't look to any school to teach. I think parents should cry with their children. Some parents do cry with their children. Don Woodland. I was told to ignore bullies on point, Stacy. That is not always the best thing to be told. It can make it worse. Yeah. It's about learning to communicate, and a lot of times we don't know how to communicate because I've had people come at me sideways, you know, in my grown-up state. Now, I don't deal with bullies. When I was a child, I did cower. I had to heal that body language because even at 19 years old, I remember I would walk around. You know, I walked around a lot with my head down, my hair covering my face and stuff like this. That was my body language, and people would tell me, Stacy. So I'd look up and they'd say, smile. You know, these kind of things, because I just did not believe in myself. And so it was learning to believe in myself. I had to learn to believe in myself. And I had to have somebody help teach me that. My coach had to help teach me to believe in myself. She had to remind me of my talents and gifts and everything. And she had to remind me, Stacy, what do you want? Because I didn't know how to achieve what I wanted. You know, I just didn't know how. And I wasn't even sure sometimes what I wanted. Canceled Explorer. Ah, thank you. Yes, powerful lessons, Joseph. Rodolfo, I'm glad that you're here and you're in your own account this time. I recognize you. I'm glad that you're here. Rodolfo, John London, I missed you lots, yeah. I know. Chester in the Northwest over London, but Italy is ever better. I know. I'm looking at like Tivoli, Italy right now because I want to be close to Rome, I think. So I'm looking at Tivoli, Italy. I like the way it sounds too. Tivoli, Italy. So we'll see where I end up. I've still got some time before I get there, but what I do today affects what happens tomorrow. So even just putting that in my consciousness. So, darling, Don, we're all perfectly imperfect. You're stunned when you get a compliment, Rodolfo? I hope you're willing to accept it, though. Leo Lee, my mom physically abused me, and I don't care about the mental abuse. I have scars because of her. Mental abuse does leave scars, though, too. I hope that, Leo Lee, you're able to get a coach or a counselor or get some help because she didn't have the capacity to love you in the way that you needed to be loved doesn't mean that you don't deserve love. We all deserve love. You're lovable. And so I hope that you know that, and that you're able to get the help so that you love yourself, so that when you navigate in the outside world, that when you love yourself, you will make decisions, you'll make choices that are aligned with loving yourself to where you're not being abused, because that's just not right. Life is beautiful, Joseph. Samir, Lodi, I was upset today. Oh, well, I hope it gets better at work. John London, you might be able to smuggle Grinch into any country you want. Where there's a will. I know, but when I was looking into Spain, I was thinking, but they said there's a very high penalty. I mean, they are serious, very serious. So, yeah, I just am like, well, London, I wanted to end up retired in London, not London, I mean, but Italy. That's been a bucket list dream and goal of mine. And I'm like, all right, well, I guess it's just making that bucket list dream and goal happen. That's what it is. Because I was going to end up in Italy anyway. So it's like, okay. So now I just got to do the things so that I can end up in Italy. And then once you're over there, once I'm over there, right, John London, I can just get on a train or a plane and just get to the next place pretty quick. All energy is healing, Joseph. It sure is. I do believe so. I believe that there's always a catalyst, like what Don is dealing with, what I dealt with when we have someone, and what Leo Lee can deal with is that mom is a catalyst for him to realize his divinity because he was born divine, worthy, and fine. But the thing is that when, we experience these things in life, and it's all roads lead us back to ourself or our source, right? So, no, been sleeping good at all, not been sleeping good at all. He's up and down. Don, what do you want though? What do you want? And then I know that you can't sleep good with him, but he gets a lot of your power, and you are powerful that you don't know because he's getting a lot of your power. When you don't get sleep, it sucks the life out of you. Don, I sensed and picked up, felt everything, even when very tiny. Yeah. Kim, I walk with my head down and don't have RBF down, LOL. I used to, and now I walk with my head up, my shoulders up, my chest out. I think that the martial arts, teaching and learning through martial arts, helped me to develop my esteem because also healing from my addiction. And I'm still an addict. Don't get me wrong. I don't use drugs and alcohol, like I said, but I don't forget that I have an addictive personality. Because if I forget that, then I can get into some arrogance, and I like me some humility because I like to remember to stay divinely connected and wholly directed. And I mean WHOLLY, wholly directed. But it's not natural for me to walk with my head down anymore. It used to be. So this is where things comes together, because when obstacles show up, they reveal what we believe. They reveal our expectations. They reveal whether we're living from faith or fear. Two people can experience the same setback and interpret it completely different. One person sees proofs that life is against them, and the other sees a challenge that they can learn from. I used to think life was against me, so I get it. But I had to learn, that life is not against me. Sometimes it was me against me. That was all. And that was only because I didn't know better. So one sees evidence that they should quit, the other sees an opportunity to grow. The event isn't what determines the outcome. The meaning assigned to the event is what determines the outcome. So many of us spent years collecting evidence that supports our fears, and we learn to expect disappointment. When we have an expectation, that's like having an appointment with disappointment when we have expectations based on what I had talked about earlier. Grinch just flew down here. So we expect rejection. A lot of people expect rejection. So when you ask for what you need, when you expect rejection, you'll be like, hey, do you think you could do this for me? Or if you don't expect rejection, it shows up in your body language posture is hey, I noticed you really do this really well. Do you think you would be able to do that for me? And then when you have the expectation, if you have an expectation of time, don't expect them just to do it like that. They might do it right away, but they might not. So it's about, hey, I really like the way that you do this, because I tell people how to ask for what, I show or suggest how people can ask for what they want. And it's like, hey, I really like the way that you do this. Could you do that for me? I've got a thing in like 15, 20 minutes, or I got a thing in 2 days. And do you think you would have time to be able to do that for me? That's amazing. I appreciate it. People like that. They respond well to that, rather than if we're like, then they don't take us as serious when we're cowering. We expect things to go wrong. Then when something difficult happens, it feels like confirmation, right? It's like, I proved it. Proved it. Oh, a lot of people trolling, huh, Kim? Just because you're a male, you think that you don't need therapy and that just dealing with stuff? Well, if you want things to change, Leo Lee, then you might need help changing it, because we can't change things with the same mind that it was developed, the thoughts that we think about ourselves. I don't know how you deal with this stuff. You can heal with it or deal with it, but either way, you're going to feel it. You're going to feel it. It's a lot kinder and gentler when we have therapy. I do practice meditation, Laksharaha. I'm not in Los Angeles. European mainland is great for travel, so Italy is ideal. Tivoli is very colorful. Milan is also nice. I think Milan is too expensive for me. I'm not sure. So, I do read a lot of books. Those aren't my books, though. Thank you, Ricardo. So I'm trying to get down to the story, so I'm going to stay focused on the notes, but I am looking at your comments too. Thank you so much. Healing teaches us to question the evidence. That's what healing does, because we're gathering evidence. We're gathering evidence if people don't like us, or the world is a bad place, or you're numb to it. Do you feel like you're living a whole life being numb to it, though? Because I've been numb to things too, but I didn't really feel like I was living in a life. Healing teaches us to question the stories we tell ourselves, even to catch ourselves. If it doesn't feel good, is it true? Is it real? Is it necessary? And is it kind? Because sometimes we tell ourselves stories that are not kind. So healing helps us to develop new perspectives. Faith is not pretending life is easy. Faith is not denying our pain. Faith is not believing obstacles won't happen. Faith is trusting that obstacles do not get the final say. Faith is believing growth is possible. Faith is believing that healing is possible. Faith is believing that we're capable of creating a life that is not limited by what we learned as children. I'm glad I didn't think that not talking about it wouldn't change anything, because, when the pain of staying the same got greater than the pain of change. So I was able to change, and things around me changed when I was able to change. All right, this isn't a political channel. We don't talk about politics, religion, or my age. And it's not a dating site. So the obstacle may still be there, and the challenge may still be there, and the disappointment may still be there. But when we begin healing old wounds, challenging old lies, and developing faith in ourselves and the process, we stop seeing every obstacle as proof that we should give up. Instead, we begin asking a different question. Could this obstacle actually be showing me a new path? Sometimes we just need to take a new path, and we may not have thought to take that path if we hadn't had that obstacle. And sometimes that single question changes everything. So y'all ready for story time? Y'all ready for this? Boom, 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 boom. Let's breathe, darlings. We're going to take 3 deep breaths before story time and 3 deep breaths after story time. If you haven't subscribed to this channel and you find this information helpful, or this community, because this community is amazing, then please subscribe, so that you'll know when I'm coming on here. I come on, like I said, on Sundays and Wednesdays at 9 a.m. Central Standard Time, and then I come on Friday nights and Monday nights at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. You are not my king, darling, but welcome. All right. So story time. We're talking about 3 different obstacles. Thank you, Kim. Thank you. I appreciate that. So here we grow. Here we grow with story time. After we do our breathing, let's breathe. Take a deep breath in. Grinch loves to breathe in. Hold it. He's getting position. And release. Breathe in. Hold it. Release. Breathe. Hold it. And release. All right, here we grow. This story is about 3 different people, different lives, different circumstances, but they all had something in common. Each one thought they had an obstacle. What they eventually discovered was that the obstacle wasn't where they thought it was. The first was a young man named Jason. Jason loved video games, and nothing's wrong with that, but games were fun. They helped him to relax. They helped him escape. The problem was that whenever life became uncomfortable, he disappeared into the games. When relationships became difficult, he played games. When bills piled up, he played games. When he felt rejected, he played games. When he felt afraid, he played games. At first, he thought the obstacle was stress. Then he thought the obstacle was money. Then he thought the obstacle was other people. Eventually, he realized the obstacle wasn't any of those things. The obstacle was just that he'd never learned how to sit with discomfort. The games weren't the problem. The games were the escape. Once he learned healthier ways to deal with fear and uncertainty, his life started changing. Okay. So then there was Maria. We're talking about 3 different people, remember. Maria was exhausted. She worked all day, came home, she cooked, she cleaned, managed schedules, handled appointments, paid bills, took care of everyone. And she was angry. She was resentful, burned out. She kept asking herself, why doesn't anybody help me? During coaching, she started talking about her childhood. She remembered her mother doing everything. Her mother never asked for help, never expected help, never received much help. Somewhere along the way, Maria had learned that being a good mother meant doing everything herself. The obstacle wasn't her family. The obstacle wasn't the dishes. The obstacle wasn't the laundry. The obstacle was a belief that she had never questioned. So her assignment was simple. Ask for help. Ask for help. Small things at first. One request, one conversation, one boundary. And slowly she discovered something. People were willing to help. The obstacle wasn't the workload. The obstacle was the belief that she had to carry it all alone. Then there was Sarah. Sarah loved deeply. She believed in second chances and third chances and fourth chances. The problem was that her partner lied repeatedly. Little lies, big lies, half-truths, broken promises. Every time Sarah found out the truth, there would be an apology. There would be just enough change to keep hope alive. And then it would happen again. For years, Sarah thought that the obstacle was the lying. Then one day she realized something painful. The obstacle wasn't that her partner had lied. The obstacle was her belief that she could love someone enough to make them change. She finally had to ask herself, if this never changes, is this the life that I want? The question changed everything because she realized she couldn't control another person, because she could lose herself. She could love herself, she could trust herself, and eventually she walked away. So she chose herself. So not because she stopped loving them, but because she started loving herself too. Thanks, Kim. So you see, all three people thought that their obstacle was outside of themselves. Stress, responsibility, a relationship. Lewis. Well, we have to trust ourselves, Golden Wing Spirit. All right, never mind. Okay. But the real obstacle was the old belief under the situation. And that's true for many of us. It's just the old belief. So Monday, we talked about how children learn what they live. And then Wednesday, we talked about the lies we absorb and eventually believe. And then Friday, we're talking about obstacles and opportunities. And can you see how connected they all are? Because that's what I try to do, is connect these things for our growth, because it's a process. It's not an event, and it's connecting the dots. So what we learn as children becomes what we believe. And what we believe becomes what we expect. And what we expect shapes how we see obstacles. The obstacle is rarely the situation. The obstacle is often the old belief we bring to the situation. Hello, Luis. Ramon. My age is eternity. My political stance is only God can do it right. My religion life is laughing. So there are your answers for those three questions. Exactly. Good job, Ramon. You get another star. All right. So healing begins when we're willing to question the story. The story that says we're not enough. The story that says we have to do everything ourselves. The story that says people will never change. The story that says disappointment is inevitable. We had a bumper sticker in recovery that says pain is inevitable and misery is optional. Thank you, Don. So, because once we question the story, we create space for a new perspective, right? It's just growth, that's all. And sometimes a new perspective is the very thing that turns an obstacle into an opportunity, like moving to Italy. So here we grow. Here we grow. We're about to breathe again. So the one thing, that I want you to know is that the beautiful thing about healing is that we stop arguing with reality. We stop wishing people were different, wishing the past was different, wishing life was different. We begin working on what is. There was a book that I read, when I had these expectations, when I was in CODA, and my codependent sponsor was telling me, I would call her complaining about people's behavior. And she'd say, oh, you had an expectation. And I'd be thinking, yeah, so. And so when I read this book called Loving What Is by Byron Katie, I learned that expectation was any time I was disappointed. Hence why my friend says expectations are an appointment with disappointment. So we quit wishing life was different. We begin working on what is, and that's where our power comes back. Not when the life changes first. When we change is when we develop our power, because we don't need to depend on other people to change us. We don't need other people to change us. We've done that for other people. That's why I say you were born holy, worthy, and wise. So Chadian, I am from down south. I'm from Fort Worth, Texas. But I'm even more southern than that right now because I'm down near beautiful Cancun. So here we grow. I made my dreams come true, and that's what I do as a mindset coach, is help other people break these old cycles and interrupt those old patterns so that we can be who we are, not trying to perform for everybody else, but being ourselves. Well, thank you. Yeah, you can't miss it much, can you, Chodian? Oh, Louise, let's do some breathing, y'all. So I want to thank you all for being here this morning. Again, if you have not subscribed to this channel, if this resonates with you, please subscribe to the channel because I'd like to see you come back. We are on here, like I said, Mondays and Friday nights, 6 p.m. Central Standard Time, and on here on Sunday and Wednesday mornings at 9. Thank you all so much for being here. I really do appreciate you, and I hope that this has been helpful this morning. If you need further help, please feel free to email me. Thank you, Chady, and I appreciate that. And so right now we breathe at the end of these because it's a good way to start the week. And Venom, you're on the wrong channel for that. I don't know what to tell you, bud. So anyway, we breathe, and what that does is it regulates us to be in this present moment. Thank you, Rodolfo. I'm so glad you stayed. I'm so glad you were here. And I'm glad that you get to be under yours so I can remember that it's you, you know. So that's what I love about coming on here these days that I come on, is getting to see you all that I'm familiar with, and that I just love seeing y'all. Okay. So thank you so much. And Shady, and I hope that you will come on here again when I'm on here. So I'll be back on here tomorrow night at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. If y'all have any ideas for topics, like Rodolfo is so good at doing, just let me know in the comments, and I'll be glad to try to work on that if I have some experience with that. So we're going to breathe and regulate and regenerate, the regeneration of our cells. And the breathing helps our mind and our soul, and the body, of course, is our cells, so we can continue to grow. Thank you, Epic. I appreciate that. Thank you so much. We don't talk about any of that here, Euro-African, but you're welcome to breathe with us. Gaining confidence. Yes, girl. And I want to thank you so much for moderating this. I always love you and Ramon showing up and being here. I want to thank you all for being here, but let's give Tim a hand for moderating so that we can focus more on the comments. So I appreciate that. All right. So here we grow. You ready to breathe, Grinch? Let's breathe, darlings. Just like be in your body when you breathe. It helps us to hear the quiet. A lot of times we don't hear the quiet. So breathe in. Feel your heartbeat. Okay, let's be. So breathe in. Hold it. And release. Just do your best. If you can't hold it that long, that's quite all right. Breathe in. Hold it. Release. Breathe in. Hold it. And release. I know I said we were going to do 3, but I think we're going to go ahead and do 5. 5 keeps us alive. Let's do it. Ready? 2 more. Breathe in. Hold it. Release. All right, last one. Breathe. Hold it. Release. All right. Thank you all for joining me this morning. Thank you so much. Much love and appreciation to you. And I look forward to seeing you tomorrow night. Thank you. See you tomorrow. Thanks so much. Thanks, Kim.